welcome to today's show. I'm Robin Wong, and you might be expecting that I was going to have guests. We had originally scheduled Victor and Sherry Yee, and sadly, unfortunately, they couldn't make it today. Something came up, a really big thing. They're well, but they couldn't join us today. But they will be back. We will schedule them on another show. But don't let that dissuade you. I have a great show planned for you today, all right? And ACC and I, we're happy to be here to bring this information to you about diabetes and plant-based eating. So that's what we're talking about today, all right? So I want you to think about living well with type 2 diabetes. And so often I work with a lot of women with type 2 diabetes, and they don't think that they can live well. And I'm here to tell you that you can. You can really live well with your type 2 diabetes. And it all is about managing it, all right? And manage it in a way that also brings you a lot of enjoyment with eating. So what are you going to learn today? So I want you to walk away from this presentation really understanding what type 2 diabetes is and its root cause. That's the key, the root cause of it. I know if you've had diabetes for a long time, you're saying, I already know what it is, it's high blood sugars. Well, stick around because I'm going to go a little deeper than that. We're going to talk about the root cause. Also, I want you to look at why what you're doing might not be working. And what I mean by that is if you are still have high blood sugars, right, and you're doing all these things, right, you're counting your carbs, you're exercising, all these things, and your numbers still kind of keep edging up. Your A1C still kind of keeps edging up, right? I want you to really look at, learn why that might be happening, all right? Secondly, oops, we lost my slide. We'll come back. Secondly, I want you to, if that's happening, I want you to, understand that it's really not your fault, that maybe just the information you have is outdated, all right? The other thing I want you to do is I want to talk to you about how plant-based foods will help lower those blood sugars, and they'll help you lose the weight and feel full and really bring back some enjoyment with eating, all right? You won't have to be counting carbs at every meal, okay? And then I'm going to use some tips to get started. So I want you to walk away from this episode and really have some tangible things you can start implementing, all right? All right, and then we're going to cook. We're going to make something today, all right? As always, so that's the fun part. So I want to do a quick overview about type 2 diabetes. Type 1 and type 2 are different. You probably know that if you have type 2. And 37.3 million Americans, about 1 in 10, have type 2 diabetes. Old news, right? About 1 in 5. This 1 in 5 don't actually know they have it. And I think that's big news, all right? 1 in 5 people are walking around without it, meaning their high blood sugars are circulating through their body, causing problems to all of those micro vessels in their feet and their kidneys and their, all their organs, right? So just know that, high blood sugars is no laughing matter. 96 million Americans, the 1 in 3, have prediabetes, and that's more than 8 in 10 adults, right? With prediabetes, and 8 in 10 adults with prediabetes don't know they have it. That is a big deal, okay? Because if we can intervene with prediabetes, then we can really impact the progression of that disease long term, all right? And this is a really big thing because so often I hear people tell me, oh, I have prediabetes, I'm borderline type 2 diabetes, and they just use it as a reason to not do anything. And if that's you, I want to encourage you, do something, all right? This should be the wake-up call. This is a warning thing. You should start making some changes now because it's way easier to reverse your numbers and get back into a safe zone when you have prediabetes. Not impossible with type 2 diabetes, but way easier with prediabetes. Okay, so some other things. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic diet-related disease. Diet-related is an important factor in that. Okay, I want you to be key on that. That means what you eat makes a difference, all right? And then everybody goes, oh, it's high blood sugars. True, that is what that's how we categorize type 2 diabetes. But there's also something called the root cause of it, which is insulin resistance, which I'm going to teach you about today. And then, other things that when you think about type 2 diabetes, think about the approach that is taken to manage it. And sort of this mainstream approach is medications and restricting carbs. And I want you to know that, there is a newer approach that really focuses on insulin sensitivity through nutrition. Okay, and that is what's so mind-blowing about the plant-based diet and diabetes. Okay, so what are some common misconceptions? I often hear, oh, it's in my genes. I'm gonna always have diabetes, or I'm destined to have complications with diabetes. And I want you to know that you might have a predisposition with your genetics, but that's not necessarily your destiny. You have some control over that. Genetics, when it comes to type 2 diabetes, is like a light switch. It can stay turned off, okay, or it can get turned on. And what turns it on are the foods you eat, all right? So I want you to realize that just because you see your whole family that has diabetes, it doesn't mean that's your destiny, all right? You have some control over that. There's a funny joke where people say the only thing genetic about type 2 diabetes is the cookbook and the lifestyle, meaning that we learn to eat from our families, right? We adopt some of the same characteristics as far as how they live their lives with exercise and nutrition through them. And because there's that predisposition and we eat that way, then we turn on that light switch. Make sense? Okay. The other misconception is weight. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. What comes first? So a lot of people say, oh, if I just lose weight, my diabetes will, get better. And we do see an improvement often. But the problem is that so often it's harder to lose weight when you have type 2 diabetes because you have all this insulin on board now and this insulin resistance, okay? And that changes how everything's rolling inside the body, right? As far as storing fat and making you hungry and all of that. So just know that, while weight loss is a positive thing, it may not cure your diabetes. It may not reverse the numbers the way you want, all right? And often you go on these weight loss diets, okay, and you gain the weight back, all right? And I want you to find something that's going to stay with you long term, all right? And that's why I think finding a lifestyle is going to help you not only lose the weight or get your body down into your natural weight, but also help with your diabetes. The other thing is this misconception of restricting carbohydrates. Everybody has carb phobia. Everybody's afraid of carbohydrates. It's like I hear so often, I'm just cutting out carbs, no carbs for me, all of this stuff. And I've got to tell you, carbs have gotten a bad rap, all right? Especially among the type 2 diabetes crowd, because that is what you're told. That's what I was taught as a dietitian. Limit the carbs, limit the carbs, limit the carbs. So it makes every meal a math lesson of how many carbs you can eat, and it takes out all the fun. Okay, so here's the deal. Our bodies love carbohydrates. Our brain runs on the glucose that comes from the carbohydrates, right? And yes, that raises your blood sugar. And that's why your insulin's released to take those blood sugars out of your bloodstream. But there's a root cause that's making all that start, all right? And we're going to talk about that insulin resistance. Another misconception is medications are the only solution, all right? And in my world, I feel like food is medicine, okay? And just know that, having a healthy diet, a diet high in fiber, high in plants, can really mitigate how much medicine you use. And that's a really positive thing. Medications are only meant to be an adjunct to a healthy diet. But everybody seems to forget the healthy diet part, right? So they just focus on the medications, and then it's one medication, then it's two medications, and it's three, all right? And then you're looking at insulin. And so there's this progression that happens because everybody focuses so heavily on meds. Now, don't get me wrong, medications, there's many good things that happen with medications, antibiotics, right? But maybe the medications for diabetes, aren't the only solution. I just want you to hold your mind open to that idea. Okay, maybe you could have some results, and I know you can because I see them happen all the time, by changing what you eat. And the last misconception is that this is a progressive disease. And, I don't want you, you'll never get cured, all right? You can't cure type 2 diabetes, but can you reverse your numbers down? If they're high, can you actually change what you're eating and change how you're living and reverse those numbers down to a safer level? Of course you can, all right? Even the American Diabetes Association's webpage talks about a remission, right? So just know that it doesn't have to be progressive where you go from, the early stages to end stage dialysis or neuropathy and all those negative things. There can be a lower level, okay? You can keep it at that beginning level. So just know that, all right? Okay, so I want to ask you, are you taking more and more medications, all right? Are you eating a low-carb diet? Are you doing the portion control thing? I know that you can do the plate where they, portion out your food to help you with portion control. Are you dieting? Are you fasting? Are you over-exercising? Okay, exercise is a great thing, but you have to exercise a whole bunch to burn off calories, all right? It's like if I think for like 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, you'd need to run like several miles at a really good pace to burn off those calories. So it's not a very effective a way to burn calories. It's great for your muscles, great for your heart, great for your blood sugars. But if, really it's 90% diet and 10%, exercise, or 80-20. Diet is pretty instrumental in all of this, okay? And so if you're doing all these things and your blood sugars or your A1C are still inching up, I want you to realize that there is another way, and we need to look at that, okay? So this is what we're going to talk about next. Okay, you're doing all those things and your numbers are inching up because diabetes is a little bit like a sinking boat, all right? So I've got a boat picture here. Picture that you have a hole in your boat. And at first it's a small hole, so you're taking on a little bit of water. That might be your pre-diabetes range, okay? Your blood sugars are inching up a little bit. And then pretty soon the hole gets bigger, gets worse. And now more water is coming in. And now you're, trying to cut carbs, you're taking some medication. It's like bailing water, right? Okay, pretty soon it gets bigger and you're bailing faster, all right? And are you taking another medication now? So it's like the hole is getting bigger and you're bailing like crazy. So what you need to do is let's fix the leak. Let's go to that root cause and stop the rising water. Wouldn't that make sense? And that's what I want to talk to you about how to do that. So the root cause of diabetes is insulin resistance, all right? And so this is, you have cells, and your cells take up the blood glucose out of your bloodstream, all right? And when and that's just a normal process. You eat, your food gets broken down to glucose, it gets stored in your brain, your liver, and your muscle cells, right? So it's taking the blood glucose out, and then over time, your blood sugars fall, and then you get hungry again and you eat again, and it's kind of this process. And so when your blood sugars go high after you eat, your pancreas releases the insulin. All right, so what your insulin does is it's like a key, and it goes to that cell, and it's going to go into the lock and unlock it to let those blood sugars in. All right, that's the job it has to do. Now, it's way more complicated than that. Okay, there's a lot of different things that happen in there, but just for simplicity, let's think of it this way. And so what's happening is your insulin's released when you have type 2 diabetes, and it goes to that insulin receptor to unlock the door to let the glucose in, and it doesn't work. The lock doesn't work. It's like clogged up. All right, so what does that mean? It means you now have high blood sugars and high insulin in your bloodstream, right? And your cells are super hungry, okay? Some of it gets in, and but the most of it stays in your bloodstream. All right, does that make sense? So that's what insulin resistance is, and that's what you have when you have type 2 diabetes. So what's clogging the locks, right? When that's okay, well, let's figure out what that is, right? There's a little like chewing gum in there. Well, it's the saturated fats that we find in the standard American diet. So many of the foods that we enjoy, we've grown up loving, are high in saturated fats. And those are all the animal products. That's all your meats, that's all your dairy products, that's your eggs. even coconut, right? Coconut oil, it's really high in saturated fats. I know, everybody tells you, oh, it's good for you. It's high in saturated fat, okay? So remember, if you were here last week, I talked about heart disease, same sort of thing. Those saturated fats aren't good for your heart, right? They're also not good for your diabetes, right? They're causing a lot of issues, all right? So just know that's what's clogging the locks. So if you want to fix the root cause, what do we have to do? We need to eliminate those foods, right? So we want to replace those saturated fats with what? With carbohydrates. Yes, I know. You get to eat carbs again, all right? Okay, that doesn't mean you go to get to eat a box of donuts, but it does mean you get to enjoy carbohydrates again. And these foods like beans and lentils and tofu and fruits and vegetables, right? Whole grains. Yes, you can have a whole grain sandwich, a sandwich again, right? Nuts and seeds, right? And even potatoes. I know you're told not to eat starches, but you think about a potato. And what do most people put on a potato? They put butter, they put not just butter, they put sour cream, they put some cheese on top, right? Maybe sprinkle some chives on it. So the potato which is pretty okay. I mean, it doesn't have any saturated fat, now has all this stuff on top of it. Okay, so this is what I want you to start paying attention to. Well, how are you impacting, what you're eating by adding these things on? So you're taking some of these plant-based foods that you already have in your diet, but you're cooking them in oil, or you're cooking them in butter, we're frying them, all right? And so just realize that those things are not helping your diabetes. And so when you start looking at saturated fats and ways to replace them with complex carbohydrates, and I'm talking about whole foods, right? I mean, eating potatoes, eating, baked beans, eating, whole grain pasta with a marinara sauce and some broccoli thrown on it, right? All these delicious foods, those are going to be filling. They're going to have tons of fiber, so they're going to slow down the blood glucose, release into your blood system, so you won't have those spikes. And they taste delicious, and they have zero saturated fat. All right, so that's what I want you to kind of start thinking about. Okay, so what are the benefits? High fiber. Those having higher fiber foods stabilize your blood sugars. So if you're like, oh, I could never give up meat, all right, that's fine. Eat less. Eat less of it and add a bunch of vegetables, okay? Add a bunch of vegetables, add that fiber. Meat, dairy, and eggs have zero fiber in it. Fiber is your friend, my friends, okay? Just know that. And so especially with diabetes, especially with weight loss, especially with just good health and moving everything through, all right? Fiber is your friend. And so you want to, if you're going to eat some meat, okay, you want an omelet, leave the cheese off, use egg whites and add some vegetables to it, spinach and red bell peppers and mushrooms, okay? So there's a lot of ways you can veg things up, and I just want you to start thinking about that, all right? The other benefits of this is you have tons of antioxidants with plant foods and vitamins and minerals. They're just already prepackaged. You don't have to worry about taking extra supplements. Just eat the whole food and you get everything you need, right? You get all the fiber and all the vitamins and it tastes delicious, okay? It helps you reduce the risk of heart disease. And if you have type 2 diabetes, you have a higher risk of heart disease. You just do, okay? Just know that. It lowers your cholesterol, like I talked about last week. So another thing, how many of you, if you have type 2 diabetes, they want you to go on a statin, okay? Because we know heart disease and diabetes go hand in hand, so they automatically put you on a statin. So you'll lower your cholesterol levels as well, all right? So this is just a win-win all the way around. So you have your high fiber, you have low saturated fat, you have lots of antioxidants, you have no cholesterol, all right? In addition to that, you reduce inflammation, all right? That is a big one. All those joints that might be bothering you, you're eating a very low inflammatory diet when you're focusing on plant-based foods, all right? And then you can reduce your medications. That's a biggie. I just talked to a client today that told me she went off her Novolog insulin. She was pretty darn happy. She's been at it for, she's at week 4, okay? And that's a big thing to go off of meds. It's a big thing. And you lose weight. That's the beauty of it too, with eating more. It's kind of a weird dynamic of how that all works. So how do you get started? Okay. I want you just to start paying attention to what you're eating now, right? And see if there's ways you can reduce and replace those animal products. I gave you some tips already throughout this. So really look at, your meat and your dairy consumption and your eggs. And then I want you to start looking at some of the added oils that might be working into your diet. And I'm going to show you with the recipe today that I just leave them out. I just leave any of the added oil out and no one misses it, okay? So it immediately lightens it. It lightens the calorie load. And it just immediately, if you're using any sort of butter, it takes out the saturated fat immediately, all right? The third thing is try to choose lower glycemic foods. Now, we don't talk a lot about glycemic index here in the US. I see it more in the European countries or in Australia. But glycemic index literally measures how fast foods break down in your, in your system after you eat them, and how fast that glucose gets into your bloodstream. So those foods that are lower glycemic, it's a slower release, so it'll blunt those spikes, okay? And so what are those foods? I mean, so for example, whole grain bread, way better than white bread. There's always a spectrum of spectrum, okay? And then what's better than whole grain bread? Rye and pumpernickel are actually better, okay? Because they're denser. Anything with yeast is kind of airy, so it definitely breaks down faster, all right? And so you'll see that spike faster. And so within oatmeal, maybe do steel cut versus the ones in a package, the instant, all right? Maybe do 5-minute oats, okay? So your stomach does the processing instead of the manufacturer doing the processing. Makes sense? All right, and then within like the fruits, watermelon and pineapple are higher glycemic than other ones. So it's really trying to see what works with you, because different foods spike different people. And so, because we all have the same body parts, but we're all different, all right? So we have different things that we've been exposed to, with different genetics, all different preferences. And so this is where it becomes a lifestyle, because you figure out what works for you and your diabetes, and you figure out what you can stick with. So if it's eating some meat, then do that. Maybe you just want to do fish, okay? But add that fiber to it, all right? Add that fiber. And then when you find what works for you and works for your numbers, keep doing it, all right? And that's when it becomes a lifestyle, and that's what gives you the freedom from diabetes, all right? So the other thing you can do is, let me check my notes here. I know I have one more tip, I think. I have 2 more tips, okay. Number 4 is adapt your favorite recipes, all right? So often people will take on something new and they'll try all this new stuff, buy all this new. How many of you, I know this, how many of you gone, I'm gonna start eating well, and you come home with a grocery cart full of fresh vegetables, and then a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, you're throwing a bunch of them out, all right? And you're so mad at yourself because, I wasted all that money and I really had good intentions. You just took on too much too soon, okay? Choose one thing. Choose one thing. Choose one meal. Maybe it's breakfast every single day. And maybe you like to have bacon and eggs. So maybe you're going to say, all right, I'm going to try the turkey bacon. Or maybe I'm going to skip the bacon and I'm going to just do egg whites and make it into an omelet with the veggies on top. And I'm not going to cook it in butter. All right? That's a huge start. Do that and do it every day. All right? And so you're taking something you're already doing and just tweaking it a little bit to make it a better choice, okay? To make it start working toward, getting that insulin sensitivity back, getting rid of that insulin resistance, all right? So the last thing is to eat more, not less. And when you're eating a lot of plant-based foods, you need to eat more frequently. And that's a good thing with diabetes, okay? Because when you eat frequently, it keeps your blood sugars stable. Now, I know there's a lot of proponents out there for fasting, and some people love it. And if you're one of those people and it works for you, keep doing it. In fact, any of these tips, if what you're doing is working for you, keep doing that. But if it's not, if your numbers are still rising, and you're doing all these things, then it's time to look at a different approach. And that's where I want you to start kind of looking at ways you could maybe change that approach, okay? And add some of these plant-based foods in there, because fiber is really important, all right? And getting those saturated fats to reduce that insulin resistance is really important. Not just for your diabetes, but for your heart health too, and for your weight, okay? And for your weight. So just know that. So those are the tips I have for you. With eating more, I want you to eat more throughout the day, but I want you to, eat more of these whole foods, all right? Vegetables, your body loves them, and they digest them so efficiently that it, moves through you, and so you're going to eat again. So listen to your hunger and really honor your hunger and say, okay, I'm hungry again. Yeah, it's only been 3 hours, but eat again. If you're truly physically hungry, feed your body. This is where I love having people get in tune with what's going on. If your brain's saying, oh, I see those donuts, I'm hungry, you can tell the difference, right? You check in with your stomach and go, your stomach's like, no, I'm really not hungry. But your brain's going, I really want those donuts. Doesn't mean you can't have them. But just know that, when you choose that, it's not because you're hungry. It's an emotional hunger that you're choosing, all right? And just, play with that a little bit. That's, we could dive really deep into that, which I love, but, we're going to go cook next, okay? So I want to cook and have some time to do that. So that is sort of what I want you to start thinking. Wait, take those tips, start implementing them into your life, all right, as best you can, a little at a time. Small changes make a big difference. Okay, so we are going to cook. Today we are making lettuce wraps. Yum, right? Now, so you know the drill. If you've watched me before, I'll meet you in the kitchen. Thank you, everyone. Okay, here we are in the kitchen. All right, we are making lettuce wraps. And I was just asking the crew who's diligently working behind the scenes about the recipe. All right, you can find the recipe at the URL. It's tiny URL. They'll put it on the screen. Okay, they keep telling it to me and I keep forgetting it, okay? So the recipes, you can always find them in there, the ones that I've done, all right? And so today's we're doing a lettuce wrap. And this lettuce wrap is from a website, wellplated.com. And she said it's very much like the lettuce wrap recipe at P.F. Chang's. Now, I've never had the lettuce wraps at P.F. Chang's, so I couldn't really tell you if, in fact, that is true. But I did sample them. They are really good, okay? And so what I love about them is they are super easy and they go together really easily. So what we need is, it's all about the sauce pretty much. And so what I love about this is we use really common things. We use hoisin, okay? And you know, when I'm reading labels, I look for fat. And so 2 tablespoons has 1.5 grams, 0 saturated. So it means it has a polyunsaturated or monounsaturated. And if you are doing it old school way, the old way of looking at, you're always looking at carbs, sugars, right? And you're gonna like, oh, it has sugars in it. It's okay. It's okay. We're looking at fats here, all right? And so, and you think about, I use 2 tablespoons for this whole dish. So when you kind of disperse it all out, it's really not that much. So we're going to use hoisin. We use some reduced soy, reduced salt soy sauce. Okay, oh, there we go. Thank you. Hoisin. All right, we're going to use some rice vinegar. You can see that. Let's see, go this way. There we go. Okay. The recipe calls for sesame oil and canola oil. I don't use them, okay, just so you know. And then I'm going to use some extra firm tofu, and I pressed it. Okay, you can buy any brand you want. They actually now have the extra firm. I think it's by Wildwood or something like that. That works fine. And then baby Bella cremini mushrooms, which I already chopped. I don't know if you can see them. So those are all chopped up. And then just 1 package of those. Water chestnuts, which are also chopped up. I just buy them in a can and drain them and then chop them. And garlic and ginger, red peppers flakes, and green onions. And then we'll put it all in some lettuce. Okay, can you see that? Thank you. There you go. Okay, and we have the ginger and garlic and green onions. Okay, so basically what we're going to do, which I did a little in advance, is I took all the ingredients and I, made my sauce. So it was the 2 tablespoons of hoisin and 3 tablespoons of soy sauce and the rice vinegar. And like I said, it called for sesame oil, and it didn't have a lot. It had 1 teaspoon, but I wanted to try it without. And honestly, I didn't miss it. In fact, without the oil, I felt like you really tasted the ginger and the green onions and all the other flavors way more. And so, really what sesame oil, I think, adds is maybe a little bit of fragrance when you breathe it. And so, I think it's up to you, but it just adds calories. Okay, it just adds calories. And so I just chose not to. And then the canola oil, they tell you, I'll show you, they tell you to use it to start sauteing your tofu, but I use vegetable broth instead. So anytime I see an oil, I just swap it out with vegetable broth. Anytime it calls for sauteing that way, or even in a recipe, just swap it out. I just don't use it, okay? And it's hard for people to get their heads around that. It really is. Okay. So how we start with, we are going. So I already made up the sauce, which we're going to use later. Okay. And then we're basically going to. I squeezed out my tofu. Okay, you can see it here. Kind of drained out the water of it. Just going to press it a little bit, and then it says to break it up into your pan. Okay, and I use a potato masher like this, okay? So I just mash it, and I will do it in the pan. So typically what I'll do is I'll put in a little bit of broth. I just started making my own vegetable broth, and super easy. I cut so many vegetables. I'm like, why am I putting these in the compost pile? So I started making my own, but I also buy it, okay? And you know me, I like easy. So put a little bit in. The thing that's different when you cook with vegetable broth versus using oil is it actually sort of evaporates, okay, whereas the oil coats and stays. So you'll have to probably replenish the vegetable broth, okay, if you want it to not stick and not get too dried out. So basically I'm going to toss this in here. I'm going to mash it in here. It says to crumble it, but this works fine too. I'll see if I can show it to you there in a second. Let me get it crumbled. And get the heat going. And the idea is we're going to get it browned, just sort of brown it. Now, it browns fine without the oils because there's actually fat in your tofu, okay? But it's natural. So, okay, so you just want them to kind of be crumbly, and as we cook it, you're going to be able to break it up as well. All right, this is exactly how I do tofu scramble. Let me see if I can show it to you. But I love the little masher thing. Pretty easy. Okay. And we're going to brown it. It's cooking away. Okay. So can you see this? Yeah, so it's just kind of crumbly now, right? And we're just going to saute it in here. I do all of my vegetables in, my stir-fry vegetables. They're actually fried in vegetable broth. Okay, I just don't use it, oil, and no one misses it because you really taste the seasonings better. So you're going to brown this. So you kind of saute it in there. You might need, like I said, need to add a little more veggie broth to kind of keep it going. And if you haven't pressed your tofu really well, the water is going to cook out of it. So you want that to kind of cook off because you don't want it too wet. All right, so we're going to do that. And then we're going to add in, so that takes about 5 minutes or so, okay? And then we're going to speed this up, okay? We're on TV, so we're going to speed this up. So now we're going to add in the mushrooms. So remember I diced these all up. We're going to add those in. And you keep cooking until the water kind of releases, because the mushrooms are going to release some water too, okay? And cook those to get them softened up. And then we're going to add in the, so that's another 5 minutes or so. Then we're going to add in the water chestnuts. And I pre-chopped these, but I just kind of roughly chopped them. So if you want them a little smaller, you'll want to chop them up a little bit more. Like I had the sliced ones, but you might want to just give them another good go over because they just add a really nice little crunch in there. So we're going to toss those in. Okay. And we're also going to add in our garlic, our ginger, and the red pepper. I kind of put it all in a thing. Now you can always use your garlic cloves, or you can use the pre-cut garlic. You know how I like to do that fast thing. So we kind of throw that in, and you want those to kind of start. You'll start smelling how great it smells. And you cook that around. If you like ginger a lot, add more. You can add more for sure. Or, would be nice when I was doing this, I was like, you could definitely, shred some or, grate some on top too. So you get a first bite of ginger right when you eat it. So we're going to do that, cook that around a little bit more. And then we do half the green onions. We want to save some for garnish. So we're going to throw some of those in. Okay. Stir it around. And then we kind of stir that around. And then we're going to add in the sauce, okay? And this is kind of the key to it all. You want to stir it up and just stir that in. Okay. And you just kind of mix it about 30 seconds, 60 seconds until it's covered and the flavors start to blend. The thing about tofu is that it takes on the flavors of whatever you're doing, right? So I let those blend a little bit. So soy, I've had a lot of questions from my clients recently about soy, especially from women, because they think that soy is a bad food, okay? They think it's linked to breast cancer or those estrogen type of cancers. And, there's some research that came out of Vanderbilt that said that that's not actually the case. Soy products have phytoestrogens, and those are not estrogens, okay? And in fact, those phytoestrogens might block on the estrogen receptors and from having those estrogens, lock onto them. So, whole cultures have eaten soy for generations, and they had a very low incidence of breast cancer. All right. So, I think this people worry about it, and they worry about the GMOs with the soy. And I just got to say about that is that, a lot of the GMO soy goes into animal food, that in the same food that's feeding the cows and the pigs and the sheep and the, lamb, whatever it is, all the animals that we eat. And so just know that by way of that, those GMOs, are in the food system. So the good thing about using whole soy like this is that you can actually get non-GMO, okay? And it's non-GMO. And so you really want to focus on whole soy products, okay? Like tofu, like tempeh, like edamame is a great one. And they're so high in protein. There's 0 saturated fat in them. And they are high in fiber as well, okay? So I hope you will embrace using a soy product because it is a really great source of protein for you. And, it's a really great meat substitute. So, okay, so I want to show you how this turned out. Let's go ahead and put some in here. Now, I hope you guys try this and tell me if it actually is like P.F. Chang's, because like I said, I don't know. But so what I like about this is it could be a great appetizer, right? It could be a meal. So you can also garnish it with a little more color. Okay, this. Okay, the other thing I would do, because I like to veg everything up, right? This is like, okay, it's got mushrooms and water chestnuts in it and some green onions, but how could we make like more veggies in it, okay? And I really love this broccoli slaw. So if you don't want to eat tofu or you want to, add more vegetables to this, and then when you're sauteing this, throw in some broccoli slaw. It just cooks down and it just adds that much more. Now you have a cruciferous vegetable in there, so it even gives it more oomph, right? So that's kind of what I'm planning on doing with this recipe. So the two things how I'd change it is get rid of the oils and then add some broccoli slaw in it. And you might, if you do that, you might want to add a little bit, make a little bit of extra sauce, right, to account for that. But anyway, all right, so here it is. Here are our lettuce wraps. I don't know if you can see them well enough. How do they look? Don't they look delish? Yeah, and so these lettuce, you can actually buy them. They're called lettuce boats, right? They're actually like little lettuce boats. I don't know if you can see that. They kind of come already like, pulled apart for you. It doesn't get much easier. They're already washed, everything. It doesn't get much easier than that. You could just use regular romaine lettuce, anything, whatever to hold it. You could actually use this and put it in a whole wheat tortilla shell, right? You could do that. You could eat it plain, put it over rice, whatever. So it's really flavorful. So those are our lettuce wraps, everyone. I hope you try them. Like I said, the link for where the recipe is, you'll be able to find that. Do I have any questions?
What can you substitute for tofu?
Oh, what can I substitute for tofu? Good question. I would so before I found this recipe, I would do a very similar lettuce wrap recipe with this broccoli slaw. And then what I would do is I would take my leftover rice, I use brown rice, but leftover rice, and I would use the rice and the broccoli slaw, do the same process, the green onions, the water chestnuts, and a sauce. And you can just use the hoisin and just like we did and do that. You might even try doing some rice cauliflower, but if it's frozen, it's going to have a lot of fluid, right? So you probably want to have to drain that a little bit, okay? So I hope that makes sense. Any others? Okay, I think that's it. So what I got to say is next week I am back and we will be talking about weight loss. And I will have a guest. Teresa Escalante is going to be my guest and share her weight loss journey with you. I really think it's helpful to see someone that's done this. It's way easier to, you know, copy somebody or see somebody that's already done it. It's hard to model what you haven't seen, right? And so when you see somebody, you're like, oh, I could probably do that too. So she'll be joining me. We'll be cooking again. We'll talk a little bit about weight loss and how to go about that with the plant-based lifestyle. And I am so thankful that the ACC had me back, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye, everyone.